Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jason Bermas sitting in for Alex Jones, who's on assignment. And before we go back to your calls, I want to hit up ClimateGate for a moment. Now, Tuesday, snowstorm shatters local records. We're seeing this in places like Chicago. I got the headline over here. Washington, D.C., record levels. Baltimore, Maryland, record levels. And what does the mainstream media say? Well, they say it's because of global warming. See, they have their cake and eat it too. If there was no snow, it's global warming. If we have too much snow, it's global warming. But they don't even use the term global warming anymore. They say climate change, so it can be all-encompassing. Doesn't matter that China has internal documents saying that, well, this is really about a consolidation of power in world government. And I'm no fan of the Chinese or their policies, but let's look at these other headlines. And again, these are all out of the UK, mainline publications. This is Saturday's Globe and Mail. The Great Global Warming Collapse. As science scandals keep coming, the air has gone out of the climate change movement. Of course it has, because the IPCC is a UN organization hell-bent on global governance and really a one world order, a new world order with the elitists at the top, with the bankers in control, and us as the serfs and slaves. Has nothing to do with saving the planet and everything to do with taxing you to death and controlling your lives from the inside out, saying how much energy you can use, what kind of home you can live in, how many cars you can have, how many children you will be allowed. Also coming up in Invisible Empire, Ted Turner talking about 1- and 2-child policies in this country. He calls them voluntary. Folks, there's no such thing as a voluntary 1-child policy. Okay? Doesn't exist. It's like black sunshine. Doesn't happen. Okay? Just doesn't happen. Climate change research bungle. The research institute run by the head of the UN's climate body has handed out a series of environmental awards to companies that have given it financial support. That's called quid pro quo. Again, nothing to do with the climate and everything to do with empowering world government and kickbacks. The Energy and Resources Institute, of which Dr. Rajendra Pachuri is the Director General, has given corporate awards to companies such as Pepsi and Honda. Oh yes, Pepsi and Honda are so green. As well as Indian businesses. Those same companies have given financial backing to Terry through grants or paid for consultancy work. Oh, we'll hire him as a consultant for a couple $100,000 a year. That would never sway his opinion. No, no, no. New errors in IPCC climate change report. The United Nations panel on climate change is facing fresh criticism today as the Sunday Telegraph reveals new factual errors and poor sources of evidence in its influential report to government leaders. This was the end-all, be-all report, I believe, back in 2007. And let's just go through the list. The top list. This is what the mainstream media is telling you. The corporate-controlled press is admitting this. It contained the publication of inaccurate data on the potential of wave power to produce electricity around the world, which was wrongly attributed to the website of Commercial Wave Energy Company. Claims based on information in press releases and newsletters. New examples of statements based on student dissertations, 2 of which were unpublished. Did you hear that? Student dissertations that were unpublished. More claims which were based on reports produced by environmental pressure groups. They are the latest in a series of damaging revelations about the IPCC's most recent report published in 2007. Last month, the panel was forced to issue a humiliating retraction after it emerged statements about the melting of Himalayan glaciers were inaccurate. They used some, kid who was a mountain climber in his 20s saying that he took pictures and it looked like the glaciers were melting. No scientific evidence whatsoever. 0.0 evidence. And then I got to end it on this note. I thought of killing myself, says climate scandal professor Phil Jones. And Phil Jones is featured, again, in my upcoming film Invisible Empire. And this guy said, boy, when this happened, I just felt so bad, I almost killed myself. And what's really disgusting about the article is that they relate his experience to Dr. David Kelly, saying that Dr. David Kelly killed himself. He was murdered. They're saying he killed himself after he came out publicly and said that the Defense Department out in the UK had sexed up intelligence about Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. All of a sudden you find him in the woods with his wrist cut. And they're trying to say that that's a suicide and it's in relation. No, they killed this guy for telling the truth. The inquests have shown it. The cover-ups have shown it. But now Phil Jones, I couldn't deal with it. Now he won't admit that he was wrong or that he was lying. He's just upset about the way the media handled it. Read the emails, folks. The emails are the most damning thing you could possibly read. Don't read the media spin. Read the emails. All right, let's go back to a few more callers. Let's go to Jim in Virginia. Jim, you're on the line. Oh, no, Jim, he hung up. Let's go to Chris in Kentucky. Chris, you're on the line.
Hey, Jason, thanks for taking my call.
You got it.
I just, all the information you gave out about the cyber attacks and things like that, I think it's also just an attack to worsening economy. They just want to get the complete control of
I agree.
What the globalists want to do.
Well, I agree, and you can tell that when Obama is apathetic, or what is it? Agnostic towards taxes on regular Americans. Before, when he was a champion of the people, there will be no new taxes, we're leaving Iraq, we're getting out of Afghanistan, we're going to come fiscally responsible, we're getting rid of lobbyists. None of it was true. Zero of it was true. They just continue to bail out the banks with trillions of dollars. They continue to pass nightmarish legislation like the Give Act. They promote Youth Corps. And they are trying to put this country under more socialization, which is just going to lead to a global government takeover. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and I just also, you're right about the 9/11 truth. I'm a former volunteer firefighter, and after 2002, when I woke up, I was trained in, in fire behavior, and then when they started talking about the steel melting, I said, wait a minute, no way. It doesn't melt at that temperature. Mm-hmm. No way.
And people need to realize that. They've come out with so many different stories. I appreciate the call. Let's go through a few of those stories. First day, okay? Well, it just got so hot that the steel melted and then the building pancaked floor by floor by floor. Then you start looking at the videos and it doesn't pancake floor by floor. You can see huge ejections from the explosions that are taking place 20, 40, and 60 floors below the supposed quote-unquote pancake. So then they come out and they spin it and they say, well, it didn't really have to be hot enough to melt the steel. It just had to weaken it. And then this domino effect happened, and the central columns gave way. Remember, they told you it was a hollow tube. Nothing could have been further from the truth. It was a huge cross-section grid. I mean, it's out of control what they told you and what really happened. And then we point out, well, there were temperatures of over 2,700 degrees at the base of the World Trade Center. Jet fuel only burns at 1,800 degrees. They refuse to address that point. When you talk about the molten metal, it doesn't exist. They don't want to talk about the molten metal. They say, this is their talking point back. This is what the people over at Skeptics Magazine like Tom Shermer and other scumbags say. They say, well, it didn't have to be that hot. At 1,800 degrees. Listen, we're not talking about when steel loses its strength. We're talking about the molten metal that was found on the site. And then John Gross of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which are in charge of this Cybersecurity Act with the FCC, same organization, gets up in front of a college classroom at a lecture and says, well, I was on the site. I never saw any of it. And then a professor from that school, all in loose change final cut, you get it for $5, case, DVD, whole nine over at Infowars.com. One of the professors who's at the lecture says, well, wait a minute, what about this molten metal? And he's like, well, could you show it to me? Did you see it yourself? And he's like, well, no, but it was reported. Oh, I don't know of any reports. And then we play the firefighters talking about the molten metal. We play Ken Holden of the Federal Emergency Management Agency talking about the molten metal dripping from Building 6. We show you the clips where they talk about 2,000 plus degree temperatures weeks after the attacks. But the debunkers don't want to touch it because it's the truth. God forbid we act like grown-ups in this country and talk about the truth. The truth has become like some diseased organism of lepers that nobody wants to touch. Well, I'm going to embrace the truth, and I'm going to do everything in my power to change the truth of the situation from the fact that we are overrun by a tyrannical system in which corporations, special interests dominate our lives on behalf of offshore banks, to one where we have a government for and by the people again, and it's not taboo to talk about the truth anymore. That's my goal.